Yoso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Soakato Yena Bhagavata Dhammo Supatipanno Yasa Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Dhammahang Bhagavantang Sadhammang Sasangang Ime Isakare Iyatarahang Adopite Hiyavipu Jayama Sadhu no Bante Bhagava Suchira Parini Bhutopi Pachima Janatanuka Pamanasa Ime Sakare Dugatapana Karabhute Patiganhato Amhakandi Garatang Hitaya Sukaya Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavantang Abhivade Soakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Dhammasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Handamayan Buddhasa Bhagavato Pubhakaramakarang Karomase Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Handamayan Buddhanusatinayan Karomase Tangkopana Bhagavantang Ewan Kalayano Kitikasado Abhugato Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vijacharana Sampano Sugato Lokavidu Anuttaro Purisa Dhammasa Rati Sata Deva Manusanan Buddho Bhagavati Handamayan Buddha Bhitin Karomase Buddha Varahanta Varata Diguna Bhiyuto Sudha Vinyane Karuna Isama Gatato Bodhe Siyo Sujanatang Kamalang Vasuro Vandamahang Tamaranang Sirasa Jinendang Buddhoyo Sabapaninang Saranan Kemamutamang Patinauta Tamabamnu nasati Patamanusatinan. It's here, but it doesn't sound right. Patamanusatitanang vandamitang sirenahang Buddha samidaso abudome samikisado Buddho dukkha sagata chavidata chahita same Buddha sahang niyade misarirang jivitang tidang Vandantohang charisa mi Buddha seva subodhitang Nati me saranang anyang Buddho me saranang varang Etena sacha vaje navadeyang satu sasane Buddhang me vandamane neyang punyang pasutaida Sabe indire tadai me mahe sunda sate jasa Kayena wachasa wachutasa pa Bude kukamang pakatang mayayang Budo patikan hato achayantang Kalantare samare tuwa bude Handamayan damana sutatinayang karomase Sawakato bhagavata dhammo Sanditiko vakaliko ehipasiko Opanaiko pachatang veditabo vinyuhiti Handamayan dhamma bhiguting karomase Sawakatata diguna yoga vasena seyo Yo magapa kapariya tiwimo kabedo Dhammo kuloka patana tadadaridari Vandamahang tamaranang varadang mametang Dhammo yo sabapaninang saranang ke mamutamang Dutiyanu satitanang vandamitang sirenahang Dhamma sadam sidaso madammo me samikisado Dhammo dukkha sagata chavidata chahita same Dhamma sahang niyade misiris chivitang chitang Vandantohang charisami dhamma seva sudanatang Nati me saranang anyang dhammo me saranang varang Etena sacha vajena vadeyang satu sasane Dhammang me vandamane neyang punyang pasutahita Sabe piyantaraya me mahe sunda sate jasa Kaina vachaya vacheta sava Dhamme kukamang pakutam maya Dhammo patigana satu patiyata Kalandare savaitu vadalemi Handamayan sangha
Patusitantinayan karomase Supatipanno bhagavato sawaka sangho Ujupatipanno bhagavato sawaka sangho Nyayapatipanno bhagavato sawaka sangho Samicipatipanno bhagavato sawaka sangho Yadidang chatari purisa yuga niyata purisa pugala Esa bhagavato sawaka sangho Ahuneyo pahuneyo dhakineyo anjali karaneyo Anuttarang punyaketang lokasati Handamayan sanghabiting karomase Sadammajo supatipati guna diyuto Yotabido ariyapu galasangaseto Sila di dhamma pawara sayakaya cito Vandamahang tamariya naganang susudhang Sanggoyosa bapaninang saranang ke mamutamang Tateyanu satitanang vandamitang sire nahang Sangha samida sovasango me samiki sado Sango dukkha sagata chavidata chahita same Sangha sahang niyade misariran nijitang Vandanto hang charisami Sangha sopatipanatang Nati me saranang anyang Sangho me saranang varang Ete nasa chawa jena wa deyang satu sasane Sanghang me vandamane neyang punyang pasutahida Sabe piyam tadaya me mahe suntasate jasa
Ayen Jayasaro Sangde kukamang pagata maya yang Sanggo patigan hatu jayantang Kalandare sangaritu vasange.
a formal request from this?
Brahma cha lokatipati sahampati katanjali andivaranam avachata santidha satta parajaka jatika dese tu dhammam anukampitam pajam.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang gunutarang upacayang namasami. I'd like to begin this evening by telling you a story. It's a story of a teenage girl who was having a lot of problems in her life, and she went to see her father. This story is a father, could be a mother, and asked for some advice to deal with the difficult situations that she was finding herself in. And the father took her into the kitchen and he said, get 3 saucepans and fill them with water and put them on the stove. And into the first saucepan, put an egg. And in the second saucepan, you put a tomato. And in the third saucepan, you put a coffee bean. And then boil the water. So the daughter did as her father suggested. And when the 3 saucepans had been boiling for some time, he turned off the heat. And the father said, look at the egg. What's happened to the egg in the boiling water? And she says it's become very hard. Become a hard-boiled egg. And what about the tomato? Oh, it's become more squishy. And what about the coffee bean? Well, the coffee bean looks about the same, but it's released all this color and nice smell. through being boiled. And the Father said we have a choice in our life. We can't escape the boiling water. We have times where we feel we're in this boiling water all around us. And what happens when people find themselves in this boiling water? Some people go like eggs. They just go hard and they try to protect themselves. Don't come close. Don't hurt me. And so that's one way you can deal with the boiling water. Other people just go all squishy like a tomato. They fall to bits. He said, but the best way is like the coffee bean. The more you boil the coffee bean, the more the coffee bean releases the flavor into the water, releases the scent into the air. And you have a choice in your life. You can't escape difficulties. This is a bumpy road. However you may pray and hope for a smooth road, there's no bumpy roads, and there's no guarantees in our life. And there'll be times in everybody's life, no matter how privileged you may be, where you'll feel you're in boiling water. But you have to learn not to become like a hard-boiled egg and go all hard and callous and unfeeling and try to blunt and to deal with the difficulties in life by stop yourself feeling anything. But you don't want to go the other extreme and be squishy like a tomato and become all neurotic and a mess, but become like the coffee bean. And with the coffee bean, not only are you maintaining your identity and your integrity, but you're able to give something and to make something rather wonderful out of this situation. So what is the quality that, or what are the qualities that enable you to live your life like a coffee bean rather than an egg or a tomato? Well, tomorrow I'm going to Kushinagar, and I'm always reminded of when I go there of the Pachimawada, the final teaching of the Buddha, where the Buddha is reminding. So the very last teaching of the Buddha, just a very short teaching. So it's clear the Buddha chose what he felt was really most important, that the most important thing to pass on to his disciples, both those that were living at that time and future generations. So all things are subject to decay. Okay, so you'll find that in many cases, this is the structure or the pattern of the Buddha's teachings. There's two phrases. One is an analysis of the situation, and second is the wisest response to that situation. Okay. So in this case, the situation, the hypothesis is that all things are subject to decay. Nothing is stable. Nothing is ultimately reliable in this conditioned world. And the advice given is that therefore you should perfect yourself in heedfulness. So there are some different ways of translating this second phrase. But in Thailand, we rather than saying strive on with diligence, which is common English translation, in Thai tradition we translate it as try to perfect yourself or complete yourself in heedfulness. So being heedful, or the noun form of heedfulness, this is one of those Victorian words that have long been used to translate Pali. And it's not a word that we use generally in our conversation. So, what does that word heedfulness mean? And one of the ways of explaining the term, a very down-to-earth kind of idiom, is take nothing for granted. We take absolutely nothing for granted. Another way of putting that is cultivating the sense of readiness. Readiness for whatever life throws at you. Not trying to create a cocoon for yourself or to try to control the situation you find yourself in, not trying to control the people that you live with, and trying to find some security in control, because control is not sustainable and it's never comprehensive. There are always gaps. So, being ready, being prepared, always bearing in mind that nothing, absolutely nothing, can be taken for granted. This is the essence of heedfulness, being heedful. In the Pali commentaries, one explanation of it is non-separation from mindfulness. So it's a constant mindfulness. This term mindfulness has become somewhat controversial, particularly since the advent of the secular mindfulness movements. As Buddhist monastics, we feel that it's something of a minor dilemma here, in that seeing how the secular mindfulness movement has been able to introduce these ideas of awareness into the mainstream of non-Buddhist cultures, and has been a real force for good, I would say. So that having that sense of appreciation, anumodana, for all that's been achieved, and yet at the same time the word mindfulness has been sort of pushed and pulled and expanded, and until it's become a kind of a hold-all for any kind of good virtuous quality. And now it's also being dragged into the marketplace and being marketed in various ways, just as yoga has become. We have hot yoga, cold yoga, fast yoga, slow yoga, upside down yoga, every kind of flying yoga, every kind of yoga. And the same things start to happen with mindfulness. And as Buddhist monks, then it's our responsibility to prevent the Buddha's teachings from being distorted, or to make sure that the meaning of the word sati, that form such an essential element of Buddhist teachings is not misunderstood by people who have come through the secular mindfulness tradition. So what does sati, what does mindfulness mean in the Buddhist tradition? Even bhikkhus and teachers don't always agree on this. The explanation of mindfulness as a kind of non-judgmental present moment awareness doesn't do full justice to the term, I think. For instance, you may have in your reading come across this list of monks who are foremost in various areas. The Buddha gave this title, Ekagata, to various monks. So various Sariputta was foremost in wisdom, Venerable Mahamoggallana foremost in psychic powers, and so on. Venerable Ananda was foremost in a number of areas, but I think somewhat surprisingly, he was declared by the Buddha to be foremost in sati. And why I would say that was surprising was because at that time he was a stream enterer. So I think it's something worth considering. How can a stream enterer be more mindful and be foremost in mindfulness and be praised more than arahants, for instance? So it's clear in this particular context, the Buddha is referring more to memory and Venerable Ananda's amazing recall of all the discourses that he had heard. So the dimension of memory is central to understanding of mindfulness. And if we consider recall as one translation of mindfulness, then I think it does help to understand certain of the teachings. So, say to be mindful in daily life, so what does that mean? You know, some people feel you have this kind of floating kind of mindful awareness that you have to carry around with you throughout the day. But my understanding is that mindfulness means recall, and you always have to have recall of something. In other words, mindfulness needs an object. So it could be the satipatthanas, the foundations of mindfulness, but it can also be the precepts, for instance. So it's not the case that you take the precepts, you keep the precepts, and then you have the moral purity that will provide the basis for development of mindfulness. But keeping the precepts in itself is a practice of mindfulness. It is the fundamental practice of mindfulness in daily life. Now, as you know, it's very rare that we're faced with hard sort of black and white choices in life. Much more common is decisions being made between various shades of grey. We're also faced with decisions where we don't have all the information that we need to make the best possible decision. There are there are things that we don't know, that we know that we don't know, and things we don't know that we don't even know that we don't know. And this is the kind of everyday problem that we have to face, isn't it? So, where do we make our stand? You know, where do we? Where is our compass point? How do we decipher? How do we make a way through this bewildering world that we live in? So the Buddha counseled that we make mindfulness precepts our bottom line. As long as you keep those 5 precepts, even if you stumble, even if you make stupid mistakes, things that you feel embarrassed about or ashamed of, you're always still basically on that middle way. That's your guarantee of safety in the samsaric realm. So being able to bring the precept to mind at appropriate moments during the day is absolutely essential. So it's not just present moment awareness, but it's bringing to mind, it's being able to recall your moral commitments, being able to recall your values when they are being threatened. I once read a very interesting book. As I remember, the title is "Why Do Smart People Do Stupid Things?" And it's a topic I've always been interested in. And I'm not saying that I'm not sure that my take on this is exactly the same as in the book, but the idea of self, of atta and anatta, sometimes it sounds like this is very profound and sort of abstruse kind of teaching, but in fact it has very down-to-earth, everyday applications. And one of the expressions of atta is taking particular descriptions of people to be permanent qualities that they possess. This is atta. So if you say, oh, that guy's really smart person, that's atta, that's a self. When people say, oh, I've just been depressed for days, that's atta. This idea, I am someone who is depressed, you see. He is someone who is smart. So a lot of Dhamma practice, after a certain while, it's not that it's not like at the beginning where, wow, I never heard that before. Wow, that's so profound. Incredible. That's unfortunately, it's like honeymoon period when you first start to study Buddhism. But after a while, you heard most of this stuff, in one form or another. But it's the application of it. It's these principles, and they gradually seep in. You see, oh yeah. So in this case, someone saying, I just feel so depressed, I get up in the morning just depressed all day. And I say, well, is that really true? You're depressed all day, so what time do you get up in the morning? What time do you go to bed? So every single breath, every single moment of today, you've been depressed, is that correct? Well, no, it's not. But the idea is that I am someone who has this thing called depression, and every now and again it may slip out of my mind, but then it comes back. So it's like my default position. But that's an interpretation, isn't it? That there is something which is the default, that's the real situation, and anything else which is not that is an exception. This is a classic fault that we make in many areas of life. So you see racists, you see some racists, very nice people actually, I know some, and you say, oh, this people from this country or from that background, they're so this and they're so that, and then they say, well, what about him? He's a really nice guy. He's not like that. Yeah, he's the exception that proves the rule. You see, or this classic phrase that West Europeans are very familiar with. Some of my best friends are Jews. Therefore I'm not a racist. So this idea that there is a truth, and anything which is not consistent with it is a temporary aberration. Another expression of it is these days quite commonly when some celebrity, some famous person behaves badly, some sports figure or some in the entertainment industry, and they say, this is not the real me. Everybody who knows me will say, this is not who I am. So this is how people live with their misconduct, is to say there's a basic me who's good and kind and so on and so on, and this is a temporary aberration from who I really am. Or I'm a depressed person, so I might laugh or enjoy this, but that's a temporary aberration from me, the depressed person. I'm a really good guy, but this kind of racist outburst is completely out of character. It's an aberration. I do these bad things, it's an aberration. But as Buddhists, we say, well, let's just take this on a moment-by-moment basis. Moment by moment, breath by breath, there's a rising and passing away. And why should this mental state be any more weighty and significant than that mental state? On what basis? If you're just saying frequency, it occurs more often, but that's not sufficient reason to make a self out of it. Those of you who have friends, from Western friends, I think one of the most difficult things to grasp in the Western mentality, and in fact, when the Dalai Lama first heard about this, I think he had tears in his eyes, as tears of compassion, and this is the sense of guilt, not guilt about a particular action, but this kind of cloud of guilt. I was born in, I don't know quite how, Dhammarama. I've never had this, so it was kind of weird thing. But if you speak to many Westerners, they will talk about this sense of there is this abiding sense of guilt, or that which is expressed most clearly, I would say, in this feeling that deep down, underneath, I'm not a very nice person. And many Westerners will say this, if these people really knew what I was like underneath, they wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. This is a very common belief, a mental state. And I believe that it's related to teachings on original sin. This would be my analysis. But without going into that aspect of it, what is clear and is very, very common is that someone with this kind of view will maybe do something really kind for somebody else, So this is not restricted to Westerners. You may notice this in yourself. So something really kind and selfless, make a real sacrifice for others, and let's say over a period of minutes or hours. And then just as they're doing this thing, really rejoicing and doing a good thing for a good thing's sake, this little thought comes up into the mind, or I'm going to get so much praise for this, or people are going to really look at me in a different way after I've done some kind of little sneaky little thought that comes up into the mind. And with this prevailing view, this common view, then the person just grasps onto that and they say, see, that's why you're really doing it, isn't it? All this kind of kindness and selflessness is just a big show, isn't it? Come on, be honest. And this idea that negative, selfish, narrow-minded mental states are more real than good and kind mental states. Why? On what basis is a negative mental state more real and more who you are than a good mental state? It's a prejudice, it's a view, it's a wrong view. So if you're looking at it from this arising a moment by moment, how step by step, the way that we try to do this as Buddhists, rather than creating nouns and creating things out of everything, then you see, sort of kusala, 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 akusala, kusala, kusala, kusala. So what's the big deal about this akusala Dhamma? Why is such a big deal? And if you can see it like that, you're putting a value on it. I remember many years ago when I was the abbot of Wat Nanachat, and Luang Por Liam came to visit, and it was late at night, and there were two of us were just sitting on outside the kuti on the veranda, and I was massaging his feet, and I was trying to. It was before he'd really been to the West, and I was telling him about Western culture, and I said, Luang Por, you have to understand, a lot of Western people, they think they're completely worthless. They put on a big show, but they feel that it's. They're afraid that they're going to get found out, that sooner or later someone's going to know that really they're worthless. And I thought this would be quite shocking to him, and so he looked at me and he said, well, they are worthless. We're all worthless. So, he had a different take on what that might mean, sort of worth meaning, sort of creating something out of nature and lifting it up and making it special. And so some of these teachings that seem very profound can in fact be very down to earth and very can be applicable in daily life. Just as some of the most simple and basic teachings can be very profound. The question, what does profound mean anyway? There's a common thing is, hear this in Thailand, somebody is like, wow, that was so profound. You say, what do you mean? Well, I couldn't understand more than, half of it. So I said, well, there's two options here. Either it was too profound, or that person just is not a very good communicator. I mean, because this is the genius of someone like Ajahn Chah. And I used to have a sign up at Wat Nanachat, years and years ago. And it wasn't a Buddhist quote, it was a quote by Albert Einstein. And he said you should try to make things as simple as possible, but no more simple. So, you know, we all love it when something that you really struggle to understand, you know, like the Paticca Samuppada or something like this, and someone comes up with a simile and a metaphor or something, you say, wow, now I understand. And we like things to be simple. But we have to be very careful because simplicity becomes like a fetish, you know, it has to be simple. And some things are not simple. Some things are complex. And they're not easily reduced to just a few phrases or an image. But why I believe that Ajahn Chah was so brilliant and so special was that he was able to simplify without distortion or without oversimplification. So this is the skill to develop. How do you simplify something without oversimplifying it to the extent where you lose some key details and some key points? And because when you oversimplify, you get very positive feedback. You know, people like, because I think it's common that the wish to feel that you understand is stronger than the wish to understand. You know, but there's not that real love of truth and real, you know, that's something that's wonderful and not so common. But we just want to basically feel that we know, you know, we know what's going on. We've got the bases covered. And I think that as educators, this is so important to point that out to students and say, don't think just because you know the names of things or you can summarize things or you can talk about things that you really understand them. Don't take this pleasant feeling that I understand this to be a proof that you actually do. It's a feeling. And as meditators, we understand feelings as feelings and thoughts as thoughts. So the question of profundity, I would say the profound is what you haven't yet penetrated, what you haven't yet realized as a direct experience. So if you haven't yet seen the value of the 5 precepts, then 5 precepts is a very profound teaching for you. But there is this kind of hunger for more content and for things that we haven't heard before. You may another one of these stories, which you may be familiar with, the Chinese scholar who endlessly searching for new and more abstruse philosophical texts, and finally hears about this sage, great sage, who lives in the middle of the wilderness and lives in a tree, a house up in a kuti up in a tree, and he's so excited that he goes on this great voyage and arduous journey over mountains and across deserts and so on and so on, and finally he comes across the sage after all this long way. And he bows with great respect. He says, "Master, please bless me with some teaching." And the master says, "Abandon the unwholesome, develop the wholesome, purify your mind." This is the teaching of the Buddhas. It's this incredible kind of disappointment. You know, it's like, but even a child of 5 knows that teaching, your holiness or venerable, and the sage says, yes, even a child of 5 knows that teaching, but even a man of 65 finds it hard to practice it. So this is a humility that we need in Dhamma practice. And this is another aspect of heedfulness. that don't assume that these teachings you've been hearing since you were a child or since you first started to practice Buddhism, don't mistake that familiarity with them as a sign that you've actually digested them and you actually understand them. Yeah, you have an understanding of them, but understanding that what we call that penetration, that thorough penetration, that's something else as well. And so that you need to have that patience just to be coming back to these same teachings again and again and again. And if you're very observant, you'll notice that, yeah, it's just like, Heraclitus, that you don't come back to the same river again, you don't come back to the same teaching exactly the same way, because there's a change in you. And when you can approach those teachings, like abandon the unwholesome, develop the wholesome, purify the mind, etc., with that kind of open awe and fascinated interest and reverence, just like a child the first time it goes to a zoo, and it's, wow, what's that? That beginner's mind, as Suzuki Roshi once called it. That's what we need. Don't be always jumping on to the next thing and the next more the new teaching, it's all profound. And so some people in Thailand will say, what was the teaching of the Buddha that most inspired you? What was the teaching of Ajahn? It's like there's just this one thing. I said, all of it. Absolutely everything. I mean, I'm not the only one that every single word that Ajahn Chah ever spoke to me is like completely, I don't have very good memory generally, but I never forget. And I remember walking around Wat Nanachat and just taking him for a walk, and I pointed up to, for some reason, I don't know, I pointed up to a window, and I mispronounced the Thai word for window, used the wrong tone, which is very easy to do. And Ajahn Chah corrected me. Now, what could be more mundane? But I was in heaven, This is like simply because he'd corrected my pronunciation of a Thai word. And so that when you have that kind of faith and that kind of just sense of how fortunate I was to be at that, I was 20 years old, coming from England, and to find myself in the presence of a bhikkhu and an Ajahn like Ajahn Chah. I mean, I just to this day, it's just a marvel to me that could have happened. So, there's Ajahn Chah's no longer around, and we can't just sit. Oh, what a shame! I never got to meet Ajahn Chah when he was. That's not a very wise approach either, but recognizing the incredible good fortune, and this is something which is stressed again and again by the Buddha in the suttas, that it's incredibly difficult to be born as a human being. So many people say, oh, I'm a scientist. Well, look, the number of human beings has been steadily increasing. Now we're up to 8,000 million. When I was born, it was 4,000 million. So how can it be so difficult to be born as a human being? Well, one answer to that is that if you can compare it with all the other realms of beings, okay, there are what is it, 7 or 8,000 million human beings, how many flies are there? How many ants are there? How many worms are there? How many beetles are there? If you just add up the number of insects, and this is just in this realm, the animal world, the insect world, and then the numbers in the other realms of beings, hungry ghost realm, the hell realms. So that number of 5,000 million, 6,000, in terms of the total number of beings in samsara, is minuscule. It seems a big number because of our scale and our appreciation, but in terms of the total number of beings being born and dying again and again every moment, it's very small. So the Buddha says it's incredible good fortune to be born in the human realm. And to be born in the human realm in a country where you have access to the Buddha's teachings, where you can freely study and practice the Buddha's teachings, that's even more. Even you pick up a Buddhist book, the first Buddhist book, you've won the lottery, basically. This is like incredible. And, to have access to the teachings that we have today, you can, on your phone, you can say, which Arahant do I want to listen to this morning, and you can listen a little bit, and then maybe, I had enough of this Arahant, I'll listen to that one. So, we start to take this for granted, and what good fortune that we have. Or you have some problem in this area. Oh, I have a lot of agitation in my meditations. You go on YouTube or something, this Ajahn giving a talk on dealing with agitation, that one, and you can listen to this one, you can listen to that one, and so we're incredibly fortunate. And again, we're told from children the way that gratitude is taught. I think it's taught all wrong, in Asian countries, Thailand, so you should be grateful to your parents. You should be grateful for this, and and that way of teaching is making it sort of something that you're being told you should be or you should do. It doesn't go very deep, or if it does, it tends to be rather superstitious and blind. But for me, and this is one of the beauties, I think, of Buddhism, is the recognition that truth and goodness go together. And what I mean by that is that the more clearly you see, then the more these virtues arise. So to me, the more you reflect on your life and what you've been given by your parents and your teachers and your people around you, then gratitude arises naturally. How could it not? It's not that you should be grateful, but look at your life. Look at the quality. If you have some, you maybe notice, you have some basic foundational qualities that you start off with. You think, I can't really take much credit for that, really. I've been like that since before I started to meditate. And those kind of foundational virtues, you can almost always say, I got that from my dad, or I got that from my mum. This is my case. I was just so irritated and furious with my father because he says, you cannot do this or something like this, So I would say, but Dad, you know, it's this and it's that. And he said, no. And he never changed his mind. You know, on this particular thing, no was no. Absolutely inflexible. And I, you know, I was quite bright boy, you know, and they'd come up with, but, you know, this is the situation today. It's not like when you were young, and I need to find these things out for myself, and I got all these really good reasons. But he said no. And it was so frustrating as an adolescent. And then when I started to practice the Dhamma and come across your monk, you know, all these sort of regulations, I was just fish in water, no problem at all. No is no, and then just that's not allowed. Okay, I don't do it. And other people, it's just so. It's like you know, it's so. It's in a cage, you know. You can't do this and you can't do that, and yeah, it's all right. So I thought, oh, you know, thank you, Dad, you know. So you're struggling with. I'm not suggesting you're like an autocrat like that, and that's the best policy to teach your children. But you know, not one of the things which is very harmful for children is when boundaries are vary according to the mood of the parent. So whether you have very strict boundaries or quite flexible boundaries, but a boundary has to be a boundary. Because if as a child, you really want to know, can I do this or can I not do this? But then if one day you're told you cannot do this, and if you do this, you're going to be punished, and then the next day, parents feeling a bit guilty, hasn't spent much time with the child, wants to give the child a bit of a present or something. So, okay, go ahead. And so now the child understands that, well, is it okay or is it not okay? You know, does it mean it's okay if you're in a good mood and it's not okay if you're in a bad mood? And then, you know, what does the child get from that? Child gets sneaky. So if you know that this parent is strict on this one and this parent is not, so you go this one and then and then here this one's more. So you know the child just gets all kinds of unwholesome habits from that. But yeah, the point I was making was that the quality, these virtues, like particularly like gratitude, for me, these are not things to be taught that you should have, but that they arise naturally the closer you look at your life. So this is the important principle in Buddhism. We're not saying trying not to be dogmatic. It's saying, now you're a Buddhist, you have to believe this, you have to believe that, and if you don't, you're going to hell. Just saying, oh, look more closely. Look at your life. Don't believe me, but look. Is it like this, really? You know, so you think that making a lot of money and being famous and so on is make you happy? Okay, that's you know, reasonable, a very commonly held belief, but does it hold up to much analysis? So, and this is why I'm basically optimistic, because goodness and virtue is just smarter, it's just more intelligent. The clearer you see, I believe, then the wiser you are, then the better you behave. It just makes more sense. And again, this pointing out this fallacy of say that in case you have all these wholesome, beautiful thoughts and you have one unwholesome, well, answer me this: why do you prioritize? Why do you consider the negative to be more real and honest and true than the positive. Can you explain that? So it's this word ehipasiko. Again, there's just different translations of it, but for me, it's a challenge to you. You're sort of like, take this away, bite on it, try it out, and see whether, because the Dhamma is ready. It stands up to scrutiny. It stands up to analysis. We're not, in Buddhist teaching, you not have to protect them from doubt and protect them from cynics and say, yeah, go ahead. You think some Buddhist teaching is superstitious or false or misguided? Go ahead, have a look for yourself. You don't have to believe me. Buddha said, don't believe something just because the Buddha taught it. That doesn't mean you reject the Buddha. I mean, if anybody's going to tell you what's right, it's the Buddha. You know, he's the number one authority. But still, you know, you say, I'm 99.999% sure that what the Buddha tells me, but I'm still going to put it to the test. I mean, that's just as it's the Buddha's role to give, it's my role to take it in the right way, in the way that the Buddha would like his teachings to be taken. So yes, looking more closely, I think that's probably the takeaway here. Look and examine and learn from experience. We are essentially learners, and I think this is what is our defining characteristic as human beings. I've told a story that I used to go and visit a monk on the island of Phuket. He's a great monk. He in the 1930s, he walked all the way from Thailand to China, and incredible stories of his adventures. And at the time that this took place, he was about 110 years old, so he was like the oldest monk, was the oldest human being in Thailand, certainly. And I went to see him and pay my respects, and he said, I'm thinking of learning English, what do you think? And it was just so wonderful that someone of 110 was still thinking of taking on a new learning project. But we can do this, can't we? We're at a disadvantage in some way compared with many animals that they only have to learn the basics from their parents for a few hours or a few days. But we have to depend on the kindness and benevolence of our parents for, 10, 20 years at least. And but the other side of it is that because we don't just absorb things, all that we need as instincts, that we have to learn things before we really integrate them. We are learners, and we are essentially learning creatures. And I think that we realize our full potential as human beings through learning. And so don't get frustrated with having to learn stuff, because this is it. This is how we're truly human. This is how we grow. Something to be proud of. Yes, so I would like to end my discourse at this point. Yes. If anyone has any questions, we're not really. Okay, a little bit over time.
Ajahn, this is a question about the atta and anatta, the difficulty in overcoming the feeling of atta.
Yes.
So, almost all the time, the ego is arising.
Sorry, I think you have to leave. Yes, please, come on.
So, like, I keep experiencing it, and I'm sure others also do, that every now and then the ego arises in some form or the other. Like sometimes it wants praise, or as you said, sometimes there's a feeling of guilt, and in multitude ways. So far, what I have understood is that as and when it arises, it has to be observed. So that's the way it weakens. And I can feel that ever since I started trying to observe it, it is like melting a little bit, like small fractions. But I just wanted to know whether there are, any other skillful ways of handling this. Like, is it just observation, or can we do something more to,
Yes, you can. I mean, I was emphasizing that particular aspect. But first of all, make the point that where the Buddha is talking about the 4 kinds of attachment, he didn't talk about attachment or grasping at self. The word he used was atuvada, or atavada. And wada here means like concept. So you don't attach to self or ego because that's not a thing. It's a concept, it's something that you create. And another pair of interesting Pali words are ahankara, mamankara, which means I making, me making. So it means like moment by moment you make anatta. It's something that you do. It's not something that you have to get rid of. You just stop doing what you're doing. Okay. So one of the skills that we're learning in meditation is we're now accessing some space around thoughts and feelings. So it's not this constant uninterrupted flow, but you're having silent periods, and then things are arising within that silence and passing away. And so having a space before and after this mental phenomena allows you to see them as simply mental phenomena. And one rather beautiful simile is sort of like the sky and clouds. This is my favorite one for teaching children. It's like the mind, it's like the sky, and your thoughts and your fears and your worries are the clouds in the sky, and don't confuse the clouds with the sky. So you have to be able to have a sense of that overarching sky before you can recognize clouds as clouds. So but the whole of the this Buddhist education system is aimed at undermining this creation of self, and we start off with dana and sharing, giving. This is the coarsest, most narrow. This is mine. Keep away. It's mine. And that's kind of the most miserable kind of mental state, isn't it? And so, we teach generosity as saying, yeah, please, have some. You're sharing. And that's not just a physical action of giving up something that that you've gained through hard work or through good fortune or whatever, but it's changing your attitude to the material world. It's no longer, I am the owner of these things are mine. Through giving and sharing, your mind changes. So when you practice dana a lot, I'm sure you get something and you immediately think, who can I share this with? It'd be such a shame if I was to use this just by myself, or maybe, I'm kind of indifferent about this, but I know he'd like this so much more than me. It's just not efficient. It's like I say, Buddhist economics, I could just get, say, 1 unit of enjoyment from this, whereas Ajahn Apamada could get like 5 units of enjoyment. What a shame, if I was just to use it up for 1 unit of enjoyment, give it to him, So this is not only about material things, it's about your sense of yourself and the way that you create an idea about yourself through your relations to the material world. And so the whole of the Buddha's teachings in every area, the Buddha says it's like the water in the great ocean. Whatever ocean, whatever sea, there's that salty taste to the water. And the Buddha's teachings from the most fundamental, the basic teachings all the way up, they all have this taste of liberation. So what does that mean? Liberation from what? It's liberation from this sense of self and identification with the body, with feelings, with perceptions, with thoughts and emotions, with sense consciousness, with the five khandhas. It's hard work. It's the most hard work. But what else are you going to do?
So, Ajahn, there are some questions coming from our online viewers.
Online?
Yeah, if you allow me, I can.
We're live, are we?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, hello everyone.
So, if you allow me, I think the first question is: can a lay person become Sotapanna in this very life? And have you met any such person?
Sotapannas, lay people can, yes, and there have been many lay people from the time of the Buddha, and we go back to Visakha and the great figures, lay figures at the time of the Buddha. There were lay anagamis in the time of the Buddha, and I'm quite sure over the succeeding centuries that there have been. I don't have any statistics or numbers and I don't want to go into individual cases that I've met. But like more to talk as a principle that the 5 precepts forms a sufficient basis for practice leading to penetration of the Dhamma and stream entry.
The second question is: my mind cannot stay alone. It always needs some work or some activity always. How to deal with this state of mind?
Yeah, well, it's just you have to gradually reduce the affairs of the mind. It's like a drug. It's an addiction. So you just have to don't push yourself too much, because if you push too violently, then the mind flips over into the opposite, and you get this kind of rebellion, and then you feel bad about yourself. And so you just very patiently, just gradually reduce that kind of addiction. And then if you're practicing meditation, then observe, how does it feel when you're mindful? How does it feel when your mind's not chasing here and chasing there? It feels good, I think. And if you can recognize that, remember that, yeah, I have experienced, even just for a short period of time, the non-busy mind, and I really liked it. And that's a seed, you know. You don't have to be afraid of it. So, you know, I think, therefore I am. I'm busy, therefore I am. You know, but there's a lot of fear there. You know, and you look at the world, sort of all the people involved, caught up in sensual indulgence. You know, this is not an IQ problem. You know, very intelligent people, doctors, and who smoke a lot, and people who say smart people who do stupid things. So why is that? One of the reasons, I think, is that if you were to ask somebody, do you not see that kind of sensual indulgence, whether it's promiscuity or alcohol or drugs or whatever, is not going to give you any true happiness? And I think we'll say, yeah, I see that. So then why? And my analysis is that it's basically feeling something is always better than nothing. Even something which is unsatisfactory, deeply flawed, causes a lot of pain, it's still better than nothing. And the fear is that if you don't have these sensual pleasures, then you'd have nothing. So it's like better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And this is why I believe that programs to wean people away from addictions, whether drug addiction or whatever, the most valuable thing is if you can allow someone to experience some inner calm, some samadhi, in other words. Because the courage to let go of sensual pleasures usually only comes when you're really confident that there is an alternative and a superior alternative. It's not something that you can really achieve through logic. So this is another real importance of samadhi practice. It gives you the emotional stability and emotional maturity to let go of things that you know are not good for you, but you just can't stop. Is that?
The last one is, first noble truth says that dukkha should be understood. Kindly guide how to understand suffering, particularly some examples of how you face dukkha.
What we're really trying to look at is how dukkha arises independence on craving. So the very simple method that Ajahn used was to frustrate his disciples, so not to allow them to follow their cravings. And so when the suffering resulted, then he said, well, look, what's going on here? You look at it. So you remember that story when Ajahn Sumedho was sweeping leaves, and it's hot and sweaty and the mosquitoes are biting him, and he's thinking, I didn't travel all this way, to come and sweep leaves and get bitten by mosquitoes. I came here to get enlightened. And Ajahn Chah walks by and he says, "What's the suffering? You know, is what Vapong the suffering?" And of course, Ajahn Smedon, there are many stories like this from monks. You know, say, "Well, no, it's not the situation itself. It's because I don't want it to be like this." That's the craving to get rid of something, or you think it shouldn't be like this, or it's not fair, or it's not this, or it's not that. That's the craving. And without it, there's discomfort, but there's no suffering. And being able to separate pain and suffering. There's one American teacher who came up with an equation. So it's like pain multiplied by resistance to pain equals suffering. And so if you have like a lot of pain and a lot of resistance, then that's like hell realms level. But if you've got a lot of pain but very little suffering, when they're multiplied together, it's not so bad. You have a little pain, but a lot of resistance, and you can have a lot of suffering. But I think it's a really useful distinction between pain and suffering. So we can't do much about pain, but we certainly can do something about suffering. So it's a matter of finding ways of not following your desires, not to think like, no pain, no gain, and the more tough you are, then the better it is, but just to be pushing against that stream of desire and see what happens. So if you've got a very wise and compassionate teacher to do it for you, then that's ideal, but often that's not the case, so sometimes you just have to experiment a little bit by yourself. You have some things that you're very attached to, whether it's your mobile phone or whatever, and then say, well, no, I'll on a one prat day, or like once a week or twice a week, I won't use my phone at all. And then you see, well, what comes up? What happens, and what's behind that? And so it's not, you say, like just making life difficult for yourself, and that's an end in itself. But to really see what's going on, and where does the pain end and the suffering begin.
So, Ajahn, there are a few more questions online. There are a few more questions online.
Yes.
If you allow me to take them. So the first question is that on the part of generosity, in particular dana to the Sangha, what happens if one gets too selective with their dana, only making offerings to popular monks or teachers? How to correct that?
Well, the first, there is a sutta in which a lay person came to make, actually it might have been Mahapajapati herself, who came to make an offering to the Buddha, specifically for the Buddha. And the Buddha said, make it a Sanghadana, there's more merit. And that's like the key teaching here, that offering Sanghadana is considered more meritorious than offering to a particular monk, even if that monk should be charismatic or reputed to be very pure. Certainly, it is valid to choose monasteries and monks that you have some faith in, because the skill and the art of offering dana is you should aim to have a sense of joy before giving, at the moment of giving, and after giving. Those are three. So sometimes if you don't know how to look after your mind, then maybe you give something and then afterwards you have some regret, or you sort of some more worldly feeling come in the mind. So that's just part of the Dhamma practice of giving dana. But I think that it's natural. If you have a teacher who's showed you great compassion and has taught you things that have changed your life, that you do feel some special gratitude for them, and you do, sometimes you want to express that through acts of dana, but it should never be at the expense of or it shouldn't mean that you don't support the other monks, or you think only him, I'm only going to give to him, or if it was a nun, to her. Because again, it doesn't have to be a doctrinal point, but look at your heart. Is that mental state something that you really want to cultivate, and that kind of discrimination? So the Buddha really did his best to reduce this to the minimum. Excuse me. So if you look at the four expulsion offences or parajika offences in the monastic discipline, the fourth seems like the odd man out. You can see the first is sexual intercourse, the second is stealing, the third is killing a human being. Well, yes, you can see for a celibate monastic order that seems quite predictable that those would be considered so serious that they could result in expulsion. But the fourth seems like an odd man out, because it's if you falsely claim some supernormal attainment, so falsely claim some level of enlightenment or some. So why on earth should that be? Yeah, I can see that that's kind of lying, and it's unethical. But why would that be put on the same level as killing and stealing? And my response to that would be that the Buddha saw the danger to the Buddhasasana of that be kind of lying. So if a monk is found guilty of committing sexual intercourse, killing, or crime, is a terrible thing, but it's like restricted to that particular individual. It's a private thing. But if you had monks who are falsely claiming to be enlightened, then you would in fact, even if you are enlightened, you're not allowed to claim it anyway. So the idea is trying to prevent this focus on enlightened beings, and trying to encourage focus on the monastic order. So in the case of someone who falsely claims to be enlightened, then what would happen? Lay people would flock to that monk and want to make offerings because of the great merits involved, and would probably neglect other monks. So that would very likely cause jealousy and disharmony within the monastic community. Also for monks who still have defilements, then it would be a bad example. And I think, if you want to have lots of disciples and lots of offerings, just claim to be enlightened and that's it. So it would be like a cancer in the Sangha. And if you had the truly enlightened monks who are modest and don't want to draw attention to themselves, then lay people may well neglect them and even look down on them. Well, obviously, that monk is not very wise, otherwise, he would have told us. So it can actually behave in very unwholesome ways to enlightened monks. So this fourth parajika can seem, as I say, somewhat more superficial or not quite on the same level as the first three, but in terms of its impact on the harmony of the Sangha, impact on the correct relationship between monastics and lay Buddhists, on the longevity of the Sangha, is probably the most serious of them. So the Buddha didn't want lay people to become too, engrossed. Well, I want the maximum amount of merit. So I have a story of this. So I was an anagarika wearing white this is in early 1979 at Wat Bapong. And in the hot season, the food, it was already quite austere there, and if you're an anagarika, you're right at the end of the line, so it's kind of slim pickings anyway. And Ajahn Chah went to England, and so the number of people coming to offer food declined because he wasn't there. And then one day, this big fancy tour bus came into the monastery, and we were just coming back from alms round, and they unloaded the back of this tour bus, and this tour bus came from Canterbury, and it was full of durian. Do you know what durians are? Do you have durian with fruit? Yeah. Durians and rambutans and all this fresh fruit which we hadn't seen for some time. And I thought, today we're going to have, a good meal. And then they were getting off the bus, and then they asked one of the senior monks, where's Ajahn Chah? I want to go and pay our respects to him before the meal. They said, he's in England. What? England? He said, and they have a sort of a hasty conference, and then they put all the rambutans and all the durians back in the bus and drove off somewhere else. So I have my own memories of this determination to make offerings to arahants, and then no arahant here, we have to go look for someone somewhere else. You're all right in northeast Thailand, you could still do that in those days, but it's just not a good thing to do.
So, Ajahn, there is this one more question. Pariyati and Patipati should go hand in hand. And the question is how?
Well, these three terms, Pariyati, Patipati, and Pativeta. So Pativeta is like the experiential penetration or realization of the truth of the teachings. So, good night. Good night. So Pariyati is that study which is conducive to the practice that leads to enlightenment. So my take on this is that it's not that we just reading for the study, for the practice, just reading for the sake of it, and the more the better. But we should have that focus of reading and studying and listening in order to apply these teachings. So without pariyati foundation, then it's very easy to get caught in wrong views. You don't have any means to distinguish between right view and wrong view, and there are so many traps and cul-de-sacs that you can find yourself entering into. Also, it's just a wonderful thing to be able to study and listen to Dhamma. But pariyatti should lead to pativeta, and pativeta also, to patipatti, into practice, and practice should lead to pativeta. So, how much pariyatti? Well, as much as is conducive to patipatti. If you start to practice, you start to study, and then the study starts to replace the practice, then that's not correct. Just as if you can't be bothered to read and study and just go straight into practice. But pariyatti is not just reading. I mean, this is your pariyatti. You're listening to me talk. This is pariyatti. You know, you're absorbing. So sometimes in the Thai forest tradition, there's this kind of there's an anti-intellectual thing. You know, shouldn't read books. They just upset your, make you think a lot. And people say, "Oh, I don't read books," but they really like to listen to Dhamma talks. I say, "Well, how is that different?" I mean, Dhamma, you're absorbing information and ideas and perspectives on the Dhamma, and that's pariyatti, and that's the pariyatti of the monks in the time of the Buddha. They didn't have books. So there's a place for listening, there's a place for discussion, and there's a place for putting it into practice. So, yeah, go ahead, yeah, there.
Hi, I was a little confused about the difference between the identification with the self that we call ego and ownership of karma from maybe previous lives. So we say that you have to own up because maybe you've done wrong things. So since you're saying that you have done wrong things, so there's still a sense of self there, that there's a unit which was called you, which did things in the past, because of which you have certain things in this life. And then again, we've been said to not identify with us, like our thoughts and other things should not, or our belongings or possessions should not be identified with that you. So what is that difference?
We come back to question of language and communication, and there is a conventional ownership, of course. I mean, so you have things that are yours by law, your house, your car, your clothes, or whatever it is. I mean, these are in daily life certainly yours, and if somebody was to steal them, then it's not as Buddhist you would say, well, they weren't mine anyway. You'd still try to get them back and tell the police and so on. So this is the conventional world, and the Buddha says that the Buddha and the Arahants abide by conventions, but are aware of them as conventions. So the problem is when we assume conventions to have some ultimate reality. But when we're aware, this is just a way of talking. But let's say you just develop some kind of fast food addiction, and you just eat lots and lots of fast food, and then you get fat. And you say, well, why are you so fat? And you say, well, I started eating all this fast food. Well, yeah, this is the karma. This is the result. When you eat certain kinds of foods, then you put on weight. So from a conventional level, you can say, yeah, you're the owner of that karma. Your body has changed because of your diet. So it's a continuity, and so I think it's quite a reasonable way of talking. But if you say that means that ultimately there was a you, this fixed, independent entity that changed because of that, that's the fault. What we're trying to see is a flow. So again, you take a photograph of yourself from 5 years ago and 10 years ago and 15 years ago and 20 years ago, and you say, well, are you the same person as you were 5 years ago? Well, I'd probably say, well, no, not really. I mean, physically, not really. Your ideas, your experiences, and so on. You're not exactly the same person, but you're not a different person either. There's a quiet. You can remember things that happen. You can see there's a continuity. So this is the idea of this continuity of flow, but without any one element of that flow which you can extract and say, that's who I really am. That's the essence of my life. There's just this sense of flow. And you see 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there are definite a relationship between how you lived your life 10 years ago and who you are today, because of the choices you made, the people that you consorted with, the work that you did, and you have the memories, and so that those memories and those habits and those are all the results. So you can say, in a conventional idiom, you say you are the owner of those results. You are who you are right now because of the things that have preceded this moment in your life. So there are so many places in the suttas where the word self is used in this conventional way. You should be the refuge of yourself. Attahi atano nato. The self should be the refuge of the self. What does that mean if there's no self? So it's this ability to, when you come across these terms, just to stop and just, how is that word being used? And is this being used in the conventional sense or in a more profound sense?
I think we should invite Ajahn to rest, perhaps.
One more question, maybe?
I had this question, like, how can you support a loved one who is not on the path of Dhamma, but he's on deathbed, and how can you support in a way that at the time of passing away, for his smooth passing away, like smooth transition, because at that point, a lot of pain is there and suffering is there in their mind. So how can we support such a person in our life, especially they have no understanding of Dhamma?
One of the first most important things is to try to determine whether that person at the end of their life has any deep anxiety and worries, whether it's about their land, their possessions, the welfare of their children, grandchildren, and so on, and try to put their mind at rest. You don't have to worry about this. We've got this covered. We can work this out. We've been told we can deal with this. So if there are specific things that the person who's passing away is worried about, try to deal with those specific things and allow them to let go of their worries about them as best they can. The other important thing and really valuable thing to do is to sit and encourage them to recall the good things they've done in their life that they feel very proud of. So this is, we're not talking about like worldly success and making a lot of money and this kind of thing, but goodness and kindness and generosity and etc. Things that, that anybody, whether they're spiritually inclined or not, you tend to have these things to say, well, whatever comes in my life, at least I've done this and I feel proud of this, and this is something that's like a bedrock of my self-respect and self-esteem, and encourage people to recall them. And when you do this first time, you can even just sit with a pen and paper and write them down, encourage them to recall things from different periods of their life. You may have to ask some leading questions because they may not come to mind so easily. But then you can sit and go through them one by one, and often you'll find there'll be one or two which are particularly powerful, and then you can focus on them, and this becomes a kind of meditation for someone who's never meditated before. And it gives them access to this joy that they have in their heart from recollection of the good things that they've done. And this can give people who have no meditation experience some sense of joy and peace at the end of their life. Okay, so very pleasant meeting you all again, and I hope to visit you all again sometime in the future. Tomorrow I fly to Kusinagar, and the following day drive to Saranath, and then back to Thailand. I have an invitation, important invitation on Sunday, and it's the birthday of Somdet Praputtakosa Ajahn, P.A. Payutto, who you may, and who is apart from Ajahn Chah, the monk that I look up to and revere the most, and I will be giving a talk at the celebration of his birthday on Sunday. So following that, it's the annual Ajahn Chah practice week, so lots going on this month, and so short and sweet, I hope sweet for you, certainly for me, a visit to Delhi, and look forward to seeing you all again, or if you come to Thailand, and maybe see you there.
Thank you. Wish you the best.
Friends, there'll be a Hindi translation, and if anyone is leaving, maybe request you to put the cushions in the corner. It will help us. And if you could stack the chairs in the corner, that would also be very helpful. Thank you very much.